So we have the first big fight of the year in Artur Beterbiev versus Callum Smith this weekend. Beterbiev defending his IBF, WBC and WBO titles. I think this is going to be a dramatic start to the year. I don't see this one going to points. In fact, I'd be shocked if it does. I've got to be honest. Both guys are big punchers, but neither of them are particularly difficult to find. And I think those are ingredients that typically lend themselves to very dramatic and entertaining fights, because you've got two guys with a lot of firepower, but not really the defensive skills to get out of the way of the other guy's offense. So I think this one is going to be thrills and spills for however long it lasts. Starting with Callum Smith, coming up from super middleweight. Of course, he's had 2 fights at light heavyweight so far, both ending in highlight reel knockouts, albeit against less than stellar opposition. Additionally, Callum Smith has been horribly inactive, basically fighting once a year since 2020, with his last fight against Border League taking place on the Usyk-AJ rematch undercard. That was nearly a year and a half ago. So, yeah, not great form in terms of activity for Callum Smith going into this one. However, inactivity has also been an issue for Artur Beterbiev throughout the course of his career, but especially recently as well. Just like Callum Smith, basically been fighting once a year. I think he fought twice in 2021, but he didn't fight in 2020 at all. So, yeah, not great for Beterbiev. However, in his favour, I think his level of opposition has been consistently higher when he has fought, and he's only been out of the ring for just under a year. He last fought Anthony Yarde on the 28th of January 2023, so just under a year. Would you rather fight a year ago or a year and a half ago? It's obvious, it's the lesser of two evils to not have fought in a year. And I know Callum Smith, he fought Canelo Alvarez in December of 2020, but other than that, it hasn't been great opposition. I think he fought John Ryder before that in, when was that, the end of 2019, whereas Beterbiev last fought Yarde, before that was Joe Smith, I think, before that was Marcus Brown. So when he has fought, it's just been better level of opposition more consistently. But getting into a more of a general overview of both guys, they've both been around for a long time, and they're known quantities, I feel. Beterbiev, as we all know, as everyone knows, is freakishly strong and powerful, but he's not just raw physicality. There is some backup from some very subtle boxing schooling, and I feel like that physicality and that schooling comes together. It's a combination of traits that has helped him to deliver big stoppages time after time. We hear a lot in boxing about, oh, this guy's a knockout artist, he's the finisher. Very few of them, if any, are like Beterbiev, because this guy, whether he's fighting entry-level competition at the beginning of his career, or he's fighting for titles or unifications against fellow champions or mandatory challengers, this guy's knocking people out. So he is legit a finisher. He's legit a big puncher. You could call him a monster. I don't think many people are going to scoff at that. Beterbiev is legit. Callum Smith, however, in his own right, he's a big guy. He's a bit of a unit at super middleweight and still seems to be so at light heavyweight. He's not necessarily as dynamic as some of the other fighters at light heavyweight, but he still has some formidable strengths. For all Callum Smith's limitations, which we'll get onto, not all of them, but the most prevalent ones, I always find myself impressed when I see Callum Smith fight. And I know some people, they aren't impressed by Callum Smith, or they think he kind of blows hot and cold. I get that, but just based on what I see from him, I'm just like, man, the counters especially, his ability to counter punch with both hands, but particularly his catch and counter with the left hook. There's just something satisfying about that particular move, and he does it so well that I always find myself impressed. I just got to hold my hands up. And for that reason, I actually give Callum Smith a very good chance of winning this fight. I see Smith as having more than enough power to drop and stop Beterbiev, who, let's remember, isn't a stranger to being hurt and sent to the canvas himself. For all Beterbiev's offensive prowess, he's not the most defensively gifted fighter. Often in fights, you'll see him pull away from shots in almost a very amateurish way. Now, there are numerous fights where you can see this, but even in his last fight against Anthony Yarde, Beterbiev sometimes, he's in range, but he's out of position. He doesn't seem to be someone who has that defensive instinct. I don't think he really has an arsenal of defensive maneuvers. You get some guys and they're very, I want to say they're very calculated. They're very defensively minded, where they can step away, they can slip, they can roll. They're just generally hard to pin down. But Beterbiev isn't really like that. But I think throughout his career, we know with his power, he always has basically a get out of jail free card. He has that serious kind of punching power that can turn a fight on its head in a split second. But I think there is a level of intimidation that a lot of his opponents basically experience because of his reputation of being this offensive juggernaut, which he is. But there are times where you see fighters who he's in against. I don't know whether they get a bit numb to the power, or they sense themselves wilting and are like, you know what, I just have to bite down on my gum shield and throw a shot. And you can catch Beterbiev. He's not that difficult to land on. It's difficult to get past his offense because it's just like artillery that you have to dodge. But if you can get to him, I think there is quite a bit of vulnerability there. And Beterbiev is no spring chicken. He's 38 years old. I'm sure he's got plenty of miles on the clock, because this was a guy fighting at the highest level as an amateur for many years. And now he's done the same as a pro. And yeah, we've seen over the course of his career, he's had to pull out fights. Fights have been delayed, pushed back because of Beterbiev sustaining injuries. This fight itself was actually supposed to happen. When was it? I know it was the end of last year, but I can't remember exactly which month. But this fight got pushed back because Beterbiev, I don't know if it was a training-related injury. I think he had some kind of bone infection from a dental operation or something. I'm sure one of you guys know. But I think there are there's definitely some vulnerability there from Beterbiev. And I don't think his condition is going to get any better. I think we've seen the best of Beterbiev. Now it's just about seeing how long he can maintain it. But I don't think you can burn that candle for as long as Beterbiev has, and Father Time is undefeated. Let's be real. I don't know if it's going to cost him in this fight, but I don't think it's going to take long. But yeah, he has these defensive lapses. I want to say this underdeveloped defense. If it's like a fight night game, you have offensive skills, defensive skills, and miscellaneous skills. I think Beterbiev, he's invested a lot of experience points in his offense. Not so many in his defensive qualities, and he can't afford to do that against Smith, because Smith is a big guy. He's going to have a size and reach advantage, but Smith also has very good offensive timing, and I feel like that's a lot of what underpins his ability to counter so well. Is some guys they just have that timing. It's this. I feel like it's a way you kind of comprehend a situation. Some guys they have like a certain ability to concentrate on rhythm and timing and that kind of thing. And that can really help them to be offensive or defensive. You develop that instinct, you kind of cultivate that understanding of, they talk about comedic timing, a little bit of a tangent, but the best, what makes things funny a lot of the time in film or whatever, and media, jokes, is the timing of the joke, It's kind of similar to a fight or fighting in that sense of timing is a very potent thing, but it's not something that everybody has. Some people have just like a natural ability to time things better than others. And I think Smith definitely does have that as a developed strength. However, Smith, his main issue, I think, and it could be a critical issue in this fight, is that despite his size advantage over basically everyone he's been in against, he can be pushed back to the ropes with relative ease. And it's a really weird visual because you've got this massive guy in the ring, but he's in against much smaller fighters in some instances, fighters who are much smaller than Beterbiev. And it's almost like they're bullying Smith against the ropes. Obviously the Canelo Alvarez fight is probably the best example of this, but even Canelo Alvarez, his offense instills a fair bit of intimidation and fear in some people because it's so explosive and dynamic and varied. But, look at John Ryder. He was able to get Callum Smith up against the ropes for large stretches. Callum Smith's last fight against Bordeaux, who was, had some size of his own, but didn't seem to be much of an offensive juggernaut at all. He was able to get Smith up against the ropes, and obviously it cost him dearly because Bordeaux ended up looking up at the lights. But it's a recurring thing from Smith where he doesn't always stand his ground. He can be pushed back, and against Beterbiev, that could spell disaster. because Beterbiev, he can be lethal when he gets forward momentum. And when Beterbiev has you up against the ropes or in a corner, he has a certain creativity with his shot selection and his combination punches, which I think is very underrated. Not many people take notice of it and give him credit for it. Like, if you look at that Anthony Yarde fight, look at some of the combinations that Beterbiev was throwing and landing on Anthony Yarde when he got Yarde in the corner. You know, we're looking at, I want to say, almost like Mike Tyson-esque combinations where he's doubling up, tripling up, sometimes even quadruple punches with the same hand. You know, Beterbiev, he's not just a 1-2 really hard puncher. No, this guy's, when he gets going, remember, he can punch with both hands with a variety of punches, and he's not afraid to mix it up to body or head. So, yeah, some serious offense from Beterbiev. And Callum Smith, I think back to those Canelo fights where Canelo was lighting him up. Body shots, uppercuts, bloodied up his nose. He made Callum Smith look like a victim at a lot of points. And now if that's what Canelo's doing, Canelo's a solid, like, good puncher. But he's not a Beterbiev puncher. Beterbiev will knock you around like a pinball if you get into that position. However, I want to say that there's a certain chance, a certain likelihood that if Beterbiev maybe looks to press the issue maybe a bit too early when Callum Smith hasn't had to soak up that much damage, Callum Smith might still be fresh, and he might still be brave enough, it's probably the right word, probably still brave enough to let a shot go. And I wouldn't be surprised if Callum Smith backs up against the ropes and Beterbiev maybe smells blood a little bit, but goes in and maybe disregards the counter-punching ability of Callum Smith, where he just lets one of those left hooks go and catches Beterbiev and hurts Beterbiev. Maybe not drop him, but Callum Smith, I think he's a mean guy. I think he is a finisher. And if he doesn't knock you out one shot, he's going to try and follow up. Because we've seen Beterbiev in similar kind of situation where he got dropped by a left hook courtesy of Callum Johnson. And Callum Johnson, after that, you know, he's dropped Beterbiev quite heavy. This was way back in 2018, I think. He basically he admitted that he froze, and that's why Beterbiev was able to kind of regroup. And to Beterbiev's credit, he used his boxing skill. He started to manage distance a lot better, just pummeling Callum Johnson with a jab. I don't think that if Callum Smith gets Beterbiev in that same position where he's seriously hurt him or even dropped him, I don't think Callum Smith is going to let him off the hook. And this is the dangerous thing. This is the exciting thing about this fight is I think both guys, when they're hurt, are still dangerous. So the other guy can't afford to just fly in. If they do, I think we're going to see a real up and down seesaw type battle. But, you know, talking about all this stuff, I have to formulate a prediction. And this is one of those fights where I'm just like, you know what? The fans win. You know, I can't pick one guy or the other, so the fans win. That's the kind of fight it is. But for the longest time, I have to be honest, I've been thinking that Smith wins this one. Because I see Smith's offensive capabilities. I see the tools that he has. I'm not going to say that Smith has the style to beat Beterbiev. I think he has some tools that he could use to beat Beterbiev. You know, some very specific skills. Maybe they're a bit situational. But I've had this weird gut feeling. You know, there's been a lot of talk about Beterbiev versus Bivol. You know, how that's the fight to make. Of course it is, and how it's going to happen in 2024. I have a weird feeling that we don't see that fight. I don't know what it is. You know, when you sense that a fight isn't going to happen. I remember feeling the same way about Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. And I even made a pre-fight video on that fight. But I think in that video I might have said it, but also in live streams leading up, I was like, I just don't see this fight happening. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen. It doesn't have that okay, it's a matter of time feel. It just doesn't. And so that kind of heavily weighted my favour of Smith. It was that instinct that Beterbiev and Bivol probably won't fight. However, the closer the fight has come, the more I've kind of revisited Smith's fights. I'm just like, you know what? He has a puncher's chance, but I don't think he has the defense. I think he gets pushed back too easily. And Beterbiev, he's just so dangerous. And I know it seems so simple, but sometimes it is. It's not always that complicated. Neither of these guys are really technicians at all. Um, but I think Beterbiev will just be able to land too regularly on Smith. And Smith is still coming up. Even though he's a big guy, he is still coming up, but he just concedes ground too easily. However, I still see this being a closely contested seesaw type battle. I see both guys maybe touching the canvas, getting seriously hurt, but I do think that this probably is another fight that Beterbiev gets out of the bag. And I say that, and I'm trying to restrain myself from saying that Callum Smith wins, because I can see how Callum Smith wins, but it's just, if we're talking about percentage chances, I just give Beterbiev just that better, bigger chance of winning and retaining his belts. So in terms of an actual result, I don't think this one goes early. I think this one does go a few rounds, probably to the mid rounds, middle to middle late rounds. So like 7, 8, 9. That's what I'm thinking. I don't think it goes to points. I don't think it goes early. I think it's that kind of Beterbiev by stoppage in those 6, 7, actually 7, 8, 9, 7, 8, 9, 7 to 9. That's what I'm going for. I don't think Smith is going to be out of it, but I think he will just soak up too much punishment. Maybe the corner will throw in the towel where he's bloodied, he's beaten, probably a bit concussed. But I think Beterbiev's going to have plenty of rough moments that he's going to have to weather as well. So that is my breakdown and prediction for this fight. I've just checked the time. It's bloody long, isn't it? But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Who do you think wins this one and how? Leave it down there. I'll get back to you. For now, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next video.